Welcome here to the Hill on NewsNation. So what happened behind closed doors between Elon Musk and the Secretary of State? Plus, did President Trump just tease a new deal in the Middle East? That's topping the Hill on NewsNation tonight.
No clash. I was there. Elon gets along great with Marco, and they're both doing a fantastic job. There is no clash.
No clash, he says. You heard him there. But the New York Times is reporting tonight that Thursday's cabinet meeting at one point turned into an Elon Musk versus two cabinet secretaries argument, including the Secretary of State, as we take a live look just down the road from us in Washington as the president is about to head on to Air Force One, fly down to South Florida for his weekend after a very busy week here in Washington. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington on this Friday evening. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, the other cabinet member from that meeting, the Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, is responding to that report, but not addressing the reported incident with Musk, instead calling the meeting productive. But we also have our eyes tonight as the president walks into Air Force One and waves goodbye to Washington for the moment on two other big stories. In New York, Columbia University stripped of some federal funding. The Trump administration says the Ivy League school is fueling anti-Semitism. And in South Carolina, at any moment now, a firing squad is set to execute an inmate. You heard that right. The first time that will happen in this country in 15 years. Live reports here on the Hill in moments. But we begin tonight with our Joe Khalil on what is being said behind closed doors. Joe, hello, good evening. There was this all of a sudden cabinet meeting yesterday. Most of the secretaries there, Elon Musk, and tonight some reporting from the New York Times that has the president talking.
Yeah, look, and so from my perch on Capitol Hill, it's sort of like we've been waiting for this shoe to drop, because for weeks now we've been talking about private conversations Republicans are having, House and Senate, where they were a little frustrated, not with the goals of DOGE, but with the approach, the way they're going about it. And clearly there were some cabinet secretaries that also didn't like being sort of told or instructed what was happening within their agencies from the outside. And this sort of boiled over a little bit. You see here what Secretary Duffy said. Let's take a look at what he posted not so long ago. He says here, quote, "The president's approach of a scalpel versus a hatchet and better coordination between secretaries and DOGE is the right approach." This coming after that meeting that we've been talking about. Look, this has been President Trump's approach for about all of 24 hours.
And to be clear here, the New York Times is reporting that Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, got at it with Elon Musk, right?
Yeah, and it was because Musk was saying you're not laying off, not firing enough people within your agencies. Essentially, they're pushing back and saying that they should be the ones to run their agencies. So you get statements like this, and again, what it just shows you is that the sort of tension of, you know what, these cuts, these proposed freezes of funding, they're going to have consequences. People are going to feel them, and for a long time, it's sort of been, frustration behind closed doors. I think it's step by step, slowly starting to come out into the public eye a little bit.
Joe K., live tonight. Joe, thank you. Appreciate it. So as the Trump administration tonight, by the way, is also canceling some $400 million of federal grants and contracts to Columbia University for, they say, failing to address anti-Semitism on campus. The Democratic senator from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, weighing in on the decision, saying, quote, "Columbia let anti-Semitism run amok to cater to lunatic fringe and paid provocateurs. Now Columbia pays for its failure, and I support that." Now, protesters, as you might remember, disrupted Columbia's campus in 2024. The standoff between police and protesters escalated significantly. At one point, protesters occupied an administrative building, barricaded the doors, forcing police to storm that building. Nearly 100 people were arrested. The 2024 commencement ceremony canceled. The university's president even stepped down. Our Caitlin Becker joins us live from Columbia tonight as the administration is now taking action. Caitlin?
They are, Blake. I mean, $400 million. It is a percentage of the operating budget over here at Columbia, but it's still a significant amount of money, and it is enough to get the university's attention. They've said that they're taking this very seriously. I want you to take a look at a statement from a university spokesperson in response to this earlier today, who said, quote, "We're reviewing the announcement from the federal agencies and pledge to work with the federal government to restore Columbia's federal funding. We take Columbia's legal obligations seriously and understand how serious this announcement is." They go on to say that they're committed to combating anti-Semitism and, of course, ensuring the safety and well-being of their students. Now, to this end, Blake, newly minted Education Secretary Linda McMahon has met with the interim president here at Columbia, saying on social media that they had a productive meeting. So clearly the goal here from Columbia's side is to not get this $400 million out of their coffers. It is a significant amount of money. But as you said at the top of the show here, we saw a lot of protests right where I'm standing in the several months back. And just yesterday, protesters were back. Several arrests were actually made. Few of them were Columbia students, in fact. And we might see similar actions moving forward taken against other universities. This joint task force that's looking into anti-Semitism is reviewing other schools, 10 schools coast to coast. We're talking about places like Berkeley, Northwestern, and University of Minnesota, Blake.
Caitlin Becker live on campus as the money gets yanked. Caitlin, thank you. Appreciate it. Some intrigue tonight from President Trump about what could come next with Iran. The commander-in-chief revealing he sent a letter about a possible nuclear deal to the Iranian supreme leader. From the Oval Office, he also teased the possibility of a future announcement of some kind.
It's an interesting time in the history of the world, but we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon, very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess.
Now, President Trump withdrew the United States from the Iranian nuclear deal in 2018. The administration felt it failed to protect America's national security interests. Over to Canada now, where the Ontario Premier Doug Ford says tariff retaliation against the U.S. is still on. He says Ontario is moving ahead with tariffs on electricity starting Monday. New York, Minnesota, Michigan will have to pay 25% more for electricity coming in from Canada. I spoke to the premier earlier this week about that threat. He told me then he didn't want to have to do it.
I will do everything and anything and use every tool in our toolkit to make sure we come to a resolution.
Is that the ultimate, shutting off the electricity?
Yeah, that's the last step I want to do.
And now it's here. For his part, the president said he may impose reciprocal tariffs on lumber and dairy from Canada in the upcoming days. The president also signing an executive order establishing a Bitcoin strategic reserve. The administration says it will not sell the roughly 200,000 Bitcoin the government acquired through forfeiture or seizure, currently with a market value somewhere in the area of $18 billion. Now, they liken this to kind of a new age Fort Knox.
Bitcoin has often been called digital gold, and what we're doing with the reserve is effectively creating a digital Fort Knox to safeguard that digital gold.
Another first, this one a bit more traditional. The first jobs report today for this administration. 151,000 jobs added in February, with the unemployment rate ticking up slightly to 4.1%. It comes as the federal government lays off workers, and the Labor Department says federal jobs dropped by 10,000. President Trump saying today he does not believe layoffs will weaken the labor market.
No, I think the labor market's going to be fantastic, but it's going to have high-paying manufacturing jobs as opposed to government jobs. We had too many people in government. You can't just do that. We had many too many. This is for 40 years.
With me now, here on The Hill, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Happy Friday. Hello, brother.
And thou?
First jobs report. It was the lowest number since 2019 for February. It was the second lowest February of the last decade. We're going to be setting our clocks to 8:30 Friday, the first Friday of every month, because this is going to be a barometer going forward as the administration lays off government employees.
Pretty good number, though. I mean, basically
right in line.
Yeah, that's a number that treads water, right? Mm-hmm. It keeps it going, and things are going fine. And I'd say that's sort of where this administration is. We hear the Treasury Secretary, we hear the President, we hear other people say things are going to get worse, right? So they're trying to acknowledge and manage expectations that the tariffs, that the layoffs, that all of this stuff are going to have negative consequences. But then we're going to get to the fun part on the other side. So we're still on the fooling around and finding out phase. We're still fooling around. And then we'll find out here probably come about Easter time.
We found out what the market thought of all this week. Didn't like it. Dow down 2.3%, S&P 500 down 3.1%, NASDAQ down 3.4%. The president says he's not watching the market.
Right.
We know the White House is watching the market. But as all of this starts to take shape, Chris, with it went on Canada, then some of it came off, and he had the phone call with the big three automakers. Then a lot of it came off with Canada and Mexico, but the reciprocal tariffs are going in full force on April 2nd. But he said today there are some accommodations. Where do you think we are in this moment right now?
We're cutting off Ukraine. Actually, we're sanctioning Russia. We're having that. We're doing that. We're this, it's that. It's back and forth. And it's the problem, of course, is that nobody can quite keep up with what exactly it is.
Now, some might say that's the art of the deal.
No. And the argument in favor of it is that Donald Trump keeps everybody off balance. Everybody's off balance all the time because Donald Trump might do anything at any given time. The problem, of course, so let's say that you made widgets. Let's say you were a widget maker and you had to import parts for your widget. What are you going to do? You're going to say, well, we better hurry up and import as much as we can because the tariffs are coming. Then you get a call. Well, it sounds like the tariffs aren't coming in as soon. Do you cancel the widget order or do you proceed? What are you supposed to do? So it's just sowing uncertainty. It's just all this uncertainty into markets.
It's interesting you say that because the president said from the Oval today, as it relates to the automakers, that he thinks they might try to front run and bring a lot of these vehicles in now. Thus, part of the dynamic that we're seeing.
We're back to cash for clunkers. Who knew we'd get to do that?
I'm not sure we're there yet.
Who knew we'd get to do that?
We'll see what happens. We're going to give the people what they want. Friday Night Unfiltered to end the show later in the hour. Hang around, brother.
Sounds so risque. I don't know. Okay,
Chris Steyerwalt. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right, still to come here on the Hill. Death by firing squad. No joke. A South Carolina man is on death row, and his decision to be executed is just that, by firing squad. The first time that has happened in more than 15 years. It is scheduled to happen at this hour. The very latest out of South Carolina with this one when the Hill returns. Plus, backlash against Tesla car dealerships as the brand really is under attack because of Elon Musk's role with the government. And where's the gold? We speak with the former governor of Kentucky who has been inside Fort Knox. We talked about digital gold today, right? What about the real stuff? What's he seen inside Fort Knox? We're asking him. Welcome to Washington. This is the center of politics. I'm Blake Berman. You're watching The Hill, and we're back and forth.
Nobody likes a cracked windshield. But at least you can go to SafeLight.com and schedule a fix in minutes.
Can confirm. Very easy.
SafeLight can come to you for free. And our highly trained techs can replace your windshield right at your home.
SafeLight repair, SafeLight replace.
Go to SafeLight.com and schedule a replacement today.
Chris Cuomo, Tucker Carlson. The conversation continues.
You're going to have people say, why are you talking to that guy? And I love answering the question.
Don't miss a special edition of Cuomo, Monday, 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Some breaking news tonight here on The Hill. The first execution by firing squad. Scheduled at this hour in 15 years. It'll be the first time that happens. 67-year-old Brad Sigmund facing the death penalty for the murder of his ex-girlfriend's parents in 2001. Our Alex Capriello was outside the Broad River Road Correctional Facility in Columbia, South Carolina. Alex, this is the first time, I believe, that they've ever done this by firing squad in South Carolina. The first time in 15 years in this country. I think most people would listen to this and say, by firing squad, that happens? Yes, it happens, and here we are.
Yeah, it is still very much something that people are still coming to grips with, the fact that this is a way for capital punishment to be actually handled out. You're right, historic in the sense of South Carolina, the first time in America in about 15 years. From what we know, this execution has been carried out. We did know that the Supreme Court of the United States denied that motion for a stay. I just learned that NewsNation has independently confirmed that the governor denied clemency, which was sort of the last-ditch effort to try to prevent this execution from happening. We're still waiting on those 3 witnesses that are part of the media that are actually there to see it all unfold. They're going to take a podium right here to the right of me very shortly to sort of describe exactly how it went down. But in the meantime, I can sort of fill in the gaps based on what we've learned from the Department of Corrections. First and foremost, we knew that the last words from Brad Sigmund were delivered to his attorney. He read them out loud to the witnesses so that way they could hear. A part of those witnesses were some of the family members of the victims that were involved. We also know that Sigmund was brought into a chamber. There was a hood that was placed over his head, and then 3 marksmen from 15 feet away fired rifles directly at his heart. We know that it would have been most likely instantaneous death from the impact of those bullets coming to his chest. From what it's worth, Sigmund actually chose this method as execution instead of the electric chair or lethal injection. It goes down in history as the first of a firing squad in 15 years since Utah. I spoke to the brother of the last man, Ronnie Lee Gardner. He told me that it is still living rent-free in his mind. Take a listen.
What do you say to your opponents who say an eye for an eye?
Makes the world go blind. You know, it don't make sense. It's the same thing. Why do we kill people who kill people that show that killing is wrong? To me, it's a real moral issue, and I think it should be for everybody. Why would someone want to kill somebody else?
There are 6 more executions planned over the next 3 weeks. That includes in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Florida. NewsNation will be covering those, including the one in Louisiana, which would actually be using nitrogen gas and is a sort of suffocation method. Obviously, a lot of these are under very close scrutiny, including right here in South Carolina. A lot of protesters lined up outside this prison in protest of what's happening inside. Obviously, we're waiting for this press conference to begin. We'll bring it to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, expect it to happen here at some point later this hour, and when that happens, we will show it to you live. Alex Capriello in Columbia, South Carolina tonight. Alex, thank you. Joining me now, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, legal analyst as well. Hello, Scott. Good evening.
How are you?
Of all the things we could be talking about on a Friday night, I didn't think it would be this one, but here we are, first time in 15 years. This, though, is the end, Scott, of a very long legal and legislative process.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, every state can give a prisoner on death row an option, if you will. In this particular case in South Carolina, there were at least 3 appeals to the Supreme Court that were delayed because the lethal injection part that's an option, the chemicals, access to those chemicals for a lot of states is just difficult for them to get. And this death row inmate chose the firing squad versus the lethal injection that could take 20 minutes or so, or the electric chair that could have many difficulties as well. Right. So this was his choice. It's an option under South Carolina law. And there's 7 other states where firing squads is an option if they so choose.
Governor denied clemency today. This also went I think a last-minute appeal before the Supreme Court today as well, which they declined to take up.
Absolutely, you always have that last-minute option. You have the Attorney General on the phone, buy a hot phone, if you will. Really? If the governor is going to call at the last minute, or if the Supreme Court decision, they used to have fax machines when I was a prosecutor that would fax yes or no, and it's that simple. Including when the person is in the chair, when the person is getting an injection.
All right, it's a wild story out of South Carolina. Expecting an update here momentarily. We'll take you there. Scott, see you later in the show. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill, the president threatens sanctions against Russia to try to get a ceasefire deal in the war with Ukraine. What he said in the Oval Office today. And is there gold inside Fort Knox? Yes, there is gold inside Fort Knox. But what do you think it's like to actually see it? The White House today was touting digital gold, Bitcoin. So what about the real stuff? The former governor of Kentucky, who's been inside, will give us his thoughts on the other side. Breaking news tonight here on the Hill, the first execution by firing squad in 15 years. NewsNation is told tonight just occurred. Our Alex Capriello live in Columbia, South Carolina with what he's learning tonight. Alex?
Yeah, that information just came down momentarily, Blake. I am told that Brad Sigmund was executed by firing squad. That happened at 6:05 p.m. He was pronounced deceased officially 6:08 p.m. So right now we're at the portion where we are waiting for the 3 media witnesses who were selected to actually watch how this all unfolded to come back here, take to the podium, and explain exactly what they saw. We know that this was a very controversial moment given the nature of this method of execution, firing squad, the first time in South Carolina history, only the second time in 15 years. As I mentioned just moments ago, Ronnie Lee Gardner was the last one who was killed by this method. I'm told in about 2 minutes we're going to have that live press conference, which we'll bring. But in the meantime, I'll continue talking about what the latest is. Right before this execution took place, we were waiting to hear from the governor's office. He would have been the last-ditch effort to try to grant clemency. And we just received a letter from his office that explains exactly how that went down. I'll just read a portion of that to you, Blake, while we wait for this press conference to begin. That letter reads from the governor himself, I have carefully reviewed and thoughtfully considered the application, related materials, and other matters of record, including briefs and judicial decisions. Accordingly, unless stayed by order of a court or competent jurisdiction, the execution shall proceed. So there you have it. That was the governor, one of the last people, because we know that the Supreme Court of the United States also denied that motion of a stay. Those are typically the ways that executions in this final 11th hour would be held up from actually occurring. But again, these 3 witnesses expected to take this podium at any moment will explain exactly what it looked like, exactly what happened, what the witnesses' reactions were, what the final words of the inmate were. So again, we'll wait for that to begin. Blake.
And Alex, the witnesses are, who exactly are the 3? How were they selected?
Well, they were carefully selected because they are both representatives of a national media as well as local media.
Got it.
It looks like we have some of our speakers taken to the podium right now. We'll explain afterwards.
All right, our Alex Capriello live tonight in Columbia, South Carolina. Alex, thank you. So there is that press conference scheduled at any moment now. The first firing squad in this country in some 15 years. And it looks like, Mark, is that the start for us here? Possibly, I am told. When they officially get to the podium there, it looks like they're just starting to set things up. We will take you there live in Columbia. All right. You know what? Let's listen in here.
Everybody ready? Hello. My name is Christy Shane, CHRYSTI SHAIN. I'm the Director of Communications for the South Carolina Department of Corrections. The capital punishment sentence of Brad Keith Sigmund was carried out tonight pursuant to the order of the South Carolina Supreme Court and in accordance with state law. The execution was performed at 6:05:50 by a 3-person firing squad and he was pronounced dead by a physician at 6:08 p.m. Sigmund, 67, was sentenced to death in 2002 for murder and burglary in the deaths of David and Gladys Lark. Sigmund used a baseball bat to beat the Larks to death in their Greenville home, April 27, 2001. Sigmund's last statement was read to witnesses by his attorney and is as follows. I want my closing statement to be one of love and a calling to my fellow Christians to help us end the death penalty. An eye for an eye was used as justification to the jury for seeking the death penalty. At that time, I was too ignorant to know how wrong that was. Why? Because we no longer live under the Old Testament law, but now live under the New Testament. Matthew 5:38-39 says, quote, "You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you do not resist an evil person. Whosoever shall smite me on the right cheek, turn to him the other one as well." Romans 6:14, quote, "For sin shall not have dominion over you, for you are no longer under the law, but under grace." End quote. Nowhere does God in the New Testament give man the authority to kill another man. That is why the Bible is divided into the Old Testament and the New Testament. Remember the words of Jesus, John 7:19. Did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keep the law. We are now under God's grace and mercy. I have copies for you, and it will also be posted on our website. Witnesses to the execution included 3 members of the Lark family, a representative from the prosecuting solicitor's office, a representative from the Greenville Sheriff's Department, Sigmund's attorney, Sigmund's spiritual advisor, and 3 members of the news media who will address you now. After they all three speak, they will answer questions from the podium. They will not be available for interviews after the press conference ends, as they have their own stories to write. First, Jeffrey Collins from the Associated Press.
My name is Jeffrey Collins. I'm with the Associated Press. That's JEFFREYCOLLINS. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of walk you through what I saw today. So the curtain opened. It was about, looking at my notes, it was about 6:01, or maybe a little bit after that. And the curtain opened. Brad Sigmund was strapped into the chair. Unlike other death executions I've seen, he was in a black jumpsuit, had black Crocs-like shoes on. He was completely strapped in. It looked like there was a harness over him. There was a strap over his head. His ankles were shackled. He had a covering over his mouth that, was from about here down. When the curtain opened, he looked towards his attorney, who was on the front row of the witness. They kind of exchanged. They had an exchange. I couldn't tell because his mouth was covered what they were mouthing back and forth to each other, but it looked like he was just saying he was okay to his attorney, Sigmund did. At that point, they had the attorney came out and read the final statement. When the final statement was read, well, let me back up one step. He had a target over his heart when the curtain opened. It was already there. It was a little rectangle white paper, or I'm assuming it was paper, could have been cloth. They had a bullseye on it. It had one outer ring and one inner ring on it. It was red. The bullseye was red. So they came out, read his final statement. At that point, when that was finished, a prison employee got a hood, put the hood over Sigmund's head. Then that prison employee walked from the chair the 15 feet over to where there's a brick wall, and at that point there's a black shade, like one of those shades that you pull down and it rolls up. So that there's a black shade there. The prison employee lifted up the shade, and then from that point it was a little less than 2 minutes of nothing at that moment. I mean, you could see Brad Sigmund took several pretty deep breaths, and then suddenly the shots rang out at, I believe Christy said it was 6:05 and 50 seconds. At that point, you did see a small red stain on Sigmund's chest. It was irregularly shaped, but oval, if that makes sense. I mean, like it wasn't like a circle. It was an oval shape. I saw it looked like he may have taken a couple of his chest rose and fell about 2 times immediately after the shots. You could see a tiny piece of like tissue or something that was coming out of that. At that point, also his arm tensed up when he got shot. There's kind of this brief moment of tensing. After that,
all right. So we've been listening to the press conference there in South Carolina. A witness from the Associated Press, one of the reporters there, who witnessed that firing squad execution. He got into the details there. If you want to listen to him and find him, I'm sure there's many places where you can go get that. But the among the many stories with this one tonight. In Columbia, South Carolina this evening, as witnesses describe it, the first execution by firing squad in that state since they passed a law there in 2021, the first time that has happened in this country since 2010, in 15 years. Debate, conversation, thoughts on both sides. But tonight, they carried out that execution in South Carolina. Also this evening, President Trump and Elon Musk have pushed theories raising doubts about the amount of gold that's being held in Fort Knox. President Trump aboard Air Force One recently suggesting it was time for an audit.
We hope everything's fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there.
Where would the gold have gone?
The gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
The U.S. Mint says it holds about half of the country's gold with a market value of over $430 billion inside the vault located on the military base. But Musk has recently opined that much of that gold may have been possibly compromised, a theory that has been dismissed by the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who claims everything is accounted for. Joining us now, one of the very few people who have actually been inside Fort Knox, the former governor of Kentucky, Matt Bevin. Hello, sir, who can be seen here in a black and white picture inside Fort Knox. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for sticking with us on obviously what is an unusual night here on the Hill, but appreciate it, sir. I'm looking at that picture. Why is it black and white? Curious. All the ones that I've seen are black and white.
It looks a little grainy, a little suspicious, almost like a mugshot of some sort, like it's something from a heist of some sort. But I can assure you, none of us left with anything of value.
All right. So you heard the president there. There's some intrigue around Fort Knox. Are folks right to question what may or may not be inside?
Think about this, Blake. I mean, the president has used the word fabled, and I think that's a good word, the fabled Fort Knox. There's very few people in America that have not heard of Fort Knox. It is somewhat iconic. It's been featured in movies and in theories and in all songs. And so people should wonder what's in there. Frankly, I had always wanted to go inside there, imagined how awesome that would be. And I'm very blessed to have been one of the few people on Earth. There have probably been more people on the space station, frankly, than have been down in Fort Knox.
So what'd you see? What'd you see when you were there? Take us behind the curtain. What'd you see? And do you have any reservations or suspicions?
It was a small cricket on crutches. That's really all we... No, I'm just kidding. There was... When they take you down there, there's obviously a very secure process. The gold, as I think people know, is not in the building that is seen, but it's actually beneath the ground. There are very serious processes that have to be conducted to get people both in and out of there. And what we saw was a lot of gold. It is segregated into different areas. It's not all in one big pile. But back to your question about, do I think people should want an audit? Yes, they should. This is our money. It's your money. It's my money. It's the American people's money. So sure, let's audit it. Let's look at it. If I were the president, I'd want to go in there.
What about live streaming it?
Elon
Musk has talked about live streaming it so we all can see it. What about that?
I would say this. I don't know that that's a good idea. The reason being, security is there for a reason. When you talk about a place that has hundreds of billions of dollars worth of gold and other assets, I think showing too much would not necessarily be a good idea, but I think it should be verified without question.
Fair enough. He is the former governor there of Kentucky. Wish we had more time. Thanks for hanging with us. Matt Bevin, a lot to get to. I hope to have you back here on the show. Appreciate it.
Look forward to it.
All right, you got it. Still to come, the host on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, he's been asked recently a lot about a presidential run. There was even a story in The Hill about it, and he was asked about the Hill story, how he responded to that. Other side of the break.
Thank you to NewsNation for not leaving us here.
And thank y'all for busting this thing wide open.
Thank you to all of NewsNation.
You brought me back to watching cable news again.
NewsNation. News for all Americans.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. You saw this headline in The Hill. Stephen A. Smith asked this week about a potential White House run, and he responded in typical Stephen A. fashion.
7.6%. I watch these things. Yes. And I'm saying, wait a minute now. I don't want to do this. But the fact that they're talking about me this way, I must say, I approve this message.
Oh, my God, I approve this. All right, so in the aftermath of how Democratic lawmakers behaved this week at the State of the Union, waving canes, hosting placards, not standing for the teen battling cancer, it's no wonder why the party could be looking for an outsider to take the reins in 2028. And where has Stephen A. Smith been talking politics? Right here on NewsNation with Chris Cuomo, for example, one case, talking about President Trump and the Democratic Party.
When he's sitting across from these folks and he's asking about why do we give so much? Where's the rest of Europe? What's your contribution going to be? How come we have to give so much and get so little in return? We're tired of getting hosed. And it does make you look at the other party and say, you do need to explain why we've been getting hosed.
Full panel here with me now. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Hannah Brandt, Washington correspondent. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And T.W. Origi, former communication aide for Senator Lindsey Graham. Hello to you all. Happy Friday. The sun has set. The weekend's just getting started, but don't go anywhere. Stephen A., the conversation around it, I'm not sure it's as much about him, though he's obviously an interesting figure and an interesting media figure, as much as it is your party sort of searching for, where do we go from here? Is it someone in this town? Is it an outsider? How do we move forward?
Someone on the moon, someone at Mars.
Who knows?
Anybody, somebody, please. Listen, the Democrats are still in disbelief that we lost this election, how we lost it, and how we picked the wrong messaging points as opposed to the economy and the inflation. That's one thing. Stephen A. likes to talk. He's really good at sports. He's exploring kind of the obvious and political notions, but I don't think he has the political ambition. Because it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to put a campaign together and to test your numbers and to get a following behind you. That's really tough. He's got a lot. Sports fans are one thing, but the voters is a whole nother.
Your guy did it. Trump.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I think Stephen A. could actually do pretty well. He breaks the mold of orthodoxy. And you said, like, the Democrats are struggling and shocked that they lost the election. Disbelief they lost. Sure. But I think the speech that Trump gave is the great example of why they lost. Look, Donald Trump, after that speech, CNN, CBS had polling that showed overwhelming majority of Americans loved what they heard.
That's not what those polls said.
They had favorable reactions, 71%.
What those polls said is that people who watched the State of the Union to the end overwhelmingly liked Donald Trump.
Okay, but let's stay with that for a moment. You have the Democrats want to change the tone in Washington. About 5 minutes into the speech, before the man can even start, you have a congressman standing up saying you have no mandate. The man has a 51% approval rating, won every swing state. That's just not true. He talks about things that are popular among people, like cutting spending, and you have the Democrats holding up goofy paddles. That's their rebuttal. And by the way, it's also about 80-20 issues, like biological men playing female sports, which the Democrats still can't wrap their head around. They couldn't stand up and cheer for a kid with cancer. That's the reason they're losing, because they just give these layups away.
That's not true. Well, I stand up, and several Democrats stood up for those personal stories, right?
Yeah.
But if you believe Donald Trump, and that speech was all fallacy. For example, he says, I support the troops, and yet he's cutting VA benefits and firing veterans who are fighting for this country.
They're not cutting benefits. They are firing.
Well, they're firing people.
Right,
so you can't have it both ways. So if you believe in fantasy, then you like that speech. But then the reality is versus the rhetoric, and you see why the Democrats are fighting, even if they are in disbelief from losing.
You cover Democrats in this town. They are trying to figure out a way forward here.
Well, and really, they're trying to figure out who's the voice of the party.
That's what I keep asking.
Yeah.
Who's running the show?
Who's in charge? Because is it Chuck Schumer? Is it Hakeem Jeffries? Is it Senator Alyssa Slotkin who gave the response? And I mean, to me, that's kind of key, because maybe it's not her. Maybe she's not the voice of the party. Right. But maybe that's the direction Democrats are going, that more moderate, in the middle type.
But why do we need just one? How come they can't all be leaders, right? As they convalesce around issues, find a candidate in 2026.
You want 200-something leaders?
No. I said you just named 3 or 4. Okay. And they can all be leaders.
Give you last word real quick here.
What Donald Trump effectively did was steal issues from Democrats that worked for Democrats and against Republicans. He came out against free trade. He came out against, he became a protectionist. The kind of rhetoric that we had heard from Democrats for years and years, that's part of how Republicans grabbed all these blue-collar workers. What Democrats need to do, whether it's Stephen A. Smith or whomever, is find the issues that work for Republicans and steal them back, right? So that's what Bill Clinton did to Republicans. That's what George W. Bush, that's how it works, is you shoplift out of the other side the stuff that you can steal that works for you, and you bring it over and you win with that.
All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still not done yet. Other side of the break, Stirewalt tonight. It's Friday night. Oh, look at that. We got a graphic, Stirewalt. Friday night unfiltered. This is the one time we know absolutely nothing that's coming. It's the best images from the week. We react to it. Other side.
You'd be surprised.
The Vargas Report's coming up next here on News Nation. She is following the deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife as we finally are starting to learn what happened there. But there are still many questions remaining. That's 7 o'clock Eastern, a couple minutes away right here on News Nation. All right, the weekend almost upon us. You know what that means, Chris? Friday Night Unfiltered. This is the one time all week I have absolutely no idea what's coming on this show. Our team puts together the best images of the week, so they think. Chris and I unfiltered. Let's get the first one up here. What happened this week? Show us. Oh, this was obviously the image of the week.
Who's coming out against it? Who's the anti?
Yeah.
Right? Who's the? This is State of the Union. This is Donald Trump doing the switcheroony on Democrats. Get them all riled up. Get them sitting on their hands, and then say, "Oh, you don't like this?"
Yep. Kid was and is absolutely amazing, and a father holding him up too.
Totally.
What a proud
Beautiful.
moment. Really awesome. All right. Next image from this week. What do we got? Oh, so they started yanking the American booze off the shelves in Canada, the made in Canada booze on the shelves in Canada. But here's the one thing. When the American alcohol goes in, it's already paid for.